Welcome. I'm Jewish Arts Collaborative Executive Director Laura Mandel, and I'm honored to be with all of you today. This conversation is meant to be a deep dive into artivism, which is the intersection of art and activism that is the core of the Be the Change public art project. Be the Change, the concept for a project rooted in the Jewish tenet of tzedakah, or tzedek, meaning justice in Hebrew, was born in 2020 when American Jewish World Service former director and social justice warrior Ruth Messenger said to Israeli-American artist Karen Tab, "To represent justice through art, I dream of seeing a larger-than-life tzedakah box like the Lucite Museum donation boxes that says, 'Be the Change' in front of the Met Museum in New York." For me, that was all I had to hear to know that this concept had the potential to invite us all into important conversations about justice, and ultimately to help us all demystify the overwhelming task of making change in this difficult and challenging world, recognizing that this is a core tenet of Jewish life, but that artivism and repairing the world is an everyone issue. I'm grateful to my partner in crime, Karen Tab, who's the lifeblood behind this project, to Ruth Messenger, who's with us right now, for inspiring and supporting us at every step, to the Jewish Alliance for Law and Social Action for being thought partners in identifying and understanding legislation that actually underpins each of these works of art, and to the many, many partners who are central to bringing this project to life. Our first Be the Change show is on view in the Boston Fenway neighborhood for all of August through October 2022. It's going to take on a life in Cincinnati also during the fall, and then it's going to take on an iteration with our partners at the Skirball Cultural Center in LA in the spring. This program this morning is one of 3 programs that features 2 of our Boston artists, Nayana LaFond and Samuel Mendoza Kreiman. Our hope is to help understand how we can join them in being artivists. So now for this conversation at hand. It's hard to say that our country is in a moment of major upheaval with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And while trans justice and domestic violence, the themes of these 2 pieces, may not at face value be part of this same issue, the reality is that all of these issues boil down to matters of respect for all lives, gender equity, and finding more ways to support each other as a community and a world. The art we're about to explore by Nayana LaFond and Samuel Mendoza Kreiman, like I mentioned, are 2 of 6 pieces in the Boston-based iteration of this Be the Change project. And our hope is that this conversation right now will dig into how these artists are illuminating important issues, how these issues of domestic violence and trans equity are inextricably linked from the many forms of injustice that Be the Change seeks to address. And so to delve into the nuance of this all, I feel so lucky to be with all of you right now and to unpack many of these issues. So in the next hour or so, you will hear from Boston-based painter and artist Nayana LaFond, whose piece Zun Gidee is exploring issues of domestic violence. Boston-based fashion designer and artist Samuel Mendoza Kreiman, whose piece called It's Giving explores trans BIPOC equity issues. Ruth Messenger, the social justice warrior and former president of American Jewish World Service. Rabbi Claudia Kreiman, the first female senior rabbi of Temple Beth Zion in Brookline, Mass, right here, and a social justice warrior who sits on the board of Truah, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights, and is also actively involved in the J Street Rabbinic Cabinet and the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. We have Elizabeth Schön Vainer, director of Journey to Safety, the Boston Jewish Family and Children's Service Response to Domestic Abuse, an organization that specializes in providing culturally competent and religiously sensitive services for Jewish and Russian-speaking survivors. And Idit Klein, executive director of Keshet, the Boston-based national organization that works for the full equality of LGBTQ Jews and our families in Jewish life. So before we get to the specific artwork, I'm excited to welcome Ruth Messenger to help us set the stage for this conversation. So Ruth, with these beautiful and moving pieces in mind, can you give us a little bit about why we're here and why you see art as such a crucial element of activism?
Yes, and I would say thank you, Laura, and sort of thank you to the whole panel, many of whom I know. People who know me really well might be forgiven for saying that I'm sort of about justice all the time, that I quote statistics, that I argue the case, that I push people to activism. But a nice aspect of my last several decades of my life has been to think more and more about how do I get those ideas across to other people. And I've learned various and powerful ways to do that I think have made all of my approaches more solid. The one that I'm actually most comfortable with personally is telling stories. And I think we'll hear some stories today, but telling stories about people who are affected by, shall we say, bad policy, incorrect Supreme Court decisions, et cetera, et cetera. But this whole Be the Change effort is particularly focused on the power of art. And because I'm part of this effort, thank you, and thinking about when I first realized that, it actually goes back, I think, a million decades to when I was in junior high school, because what I remember as already being a noisy activist was the first time that I saw the Picasso Guernica. And it is, as most people know, a very large, it was in the Museum of Modern Art for many years, wall size painting of war. And I realized, like, okay, talking about war, even talking about a current war, which we were doing then, and looking at newspaper photos, there's an added oomph and drama by a world famous artist who has a beautiful capacity to render, in this case, his views on a wall. Bringing the issue home in a way that just a whole other tranche of people whose orientation is toward the visual or toward the musical or the dramatic, understanding the issues that way, as opposed to understanding them from someone whose tendency is to talk too much. And so I learned then a lot about the power of art and to bring these issues toward people's attention. And then frankly, my friendship with Karen Tabb, she sort of drove this home. It's what she's taken all of her art to be about, to bring these issues to people. And it is true, I just want to be really clear about this image, that what I really told her I envision is a large, let's say 8 feet high, just the word change, CHANGE, in lucite, but double-sided, so that there's a slot in each letter. And the idea is you go up to put your change in, you go up to put your loose coins in, so that the amount of money being raised comes up and up and up, and everybody feels a need to participate in creating change. And it's, for me, a very visual representation of what I believe we must all do, which is not to despair, because despair is not a strategy, and not to wring our hands about the state of the world unless we are also engaging in what we can do to make the change and to be the change we want to see. And that's what Samuel's work and Nayana's work represent, is a way to attract people to their magnificent art. And through that, to get those people to think about contemporary social issues that might not otherwise be on their agenda, or might not be on their agenda as strongly.
Thank you. What a beautiful stage you've now set for us. So with that in mind, Nayana, let's start with you, and let's start with your piece, Zun Gidee. And as I told you, I just love this name. So let's start there. Tell us about this piece, where you came up with this beautiful name, the inspiration behind this, the communities you're working with, and ultimately what you hope we're going to learn and do because of this piece.
Well, thank you. Bonjour, Annie. I'm an Indigenous artist, so I guess that's the easiest way to start for where this piece came from. The piece itself, Zungidee, which means it means she or he or they are brave, are courageous. It's one of the Anishinaabe teachings that were given to us so that we can live a good life, so that we can live a life that is free of conflict, and really just to encourage us to be good people was what it was meant for. So Zungade is actually an entire phrase in one word, and it really just means to have a brave heart. So I named it that because the piece is about domestic violence. So I tried to create a modern dwelling. The piece itself is a modern version of a wigwam. It's built out of recycled rebar and other materials, metal and plexiglass. It has sandblasted panels with handprints, which really represent the idea of both being silenced and also reaching out for help. Inside the piece, it's about 7 feet across and about 7 or 8 feet tall. And when you enter it, there are bench seats on either side. So I really want people to go inside, sit down, find it as a safe place, a place that you can have a private conversation, a place to be heard, and a place to really think about safety and home and things like that. On the outside, there's also small tiles that have QR codes. Each one goes to an organization like Mass Now, who I've partnered with, and several others, so that if you need help, or if you want to give help, or if you just want more information about domestic violence, you can scan one of those and it will bring you to that.
Thank you, Nayana. It's just beautiful. And I know because your work is so inspired by these paintings that are behind you, tell us a little bit about these incredible paintings and women behind you and what that project is all about.
Absolutely. I somewhat unwittingly in May of 2020 began what's now kind of called the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Painting Project. I painted 85 so far. Each one is a real person. So this is Kimberly and this is Vanessa. And that's kind of what's rolled into this. I'm a domestic violence survivor. And so the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples crisis is, a lot of it is rooted in domestic violence. There are other issues involved as well, including human trafficking and many, many layers. But the project itself has evolved over time and become a not-for-profit project. So I paint these for free. Families find me, they come to me, I give them free prints, and then I exhibit the originals to raise awareness and promote healing, and will eventually donate them. As I said, I'm up to 85, so these are just 2 of them.
It's beautiful. Thank you. And I know in your Be the Change piece, you mentioned this rebar and this plexiglass. You also, I think, started to mention that we're going to see one of the hands. So the way you have the hands featured on these, tell us a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. In the MMIP crisis, the hand represents being silenced. It also talks about calling home. In the red specifically, in most Indigenous cultures, is the only color spirits can see. So there will be red as well with the handprints, just to kind of harken back to that idea of calling the dead home and of the representation of being silenced. But I also want it to inspire people to not be silent anymore. So that's why I'm including the handprints on the piece. I'm not including a lot of them. I want it to be subtle.
Wow. Thank you, Nayana. Okay, so Sam, your piece, while at face value is very different, I think actually has some real interconnectedness here. So tell us about It's Giving. What are we looking at here?
Hi, everyone. It's Giving. As a fashion designer being asked for this project, I was really thinking about not only what issues are affecting communities I care about deeply, but also how my work intersects with both the public sphere and this community. And often I think about the role of trans folks, particularly trans women, and in fashion, and how often in this culture we we're very good at putting representation out, putting images out to make space and to give folks sort of the audience-facing role, but then we overlook justice, we overlook equality and equity, and we overlook some fundamental rights that are missing. In this piece, I'm inviting folks to look at beautiful gowns and to take photos of beautiful gowns, and then you're going to be faced with actually QR codes that take you to mutual aid funds, to organizations in Boston that are providing not only support for housing, food, medical expenses, but also legal, hopefully legal aid. In a way, trying to give the audience an opportunity to engage with the issue of justice for trans folks more directly, and not just as an image, not just as something to take in for entertainment, but something to help fight for, and a community to protect.
And Sam, one of the things I appreciate about you so much is that you've said a few times, this is not your own story. You are telling this story with and on behalf of others. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, as a Latino gay man who is cis, I'm not trans, and it's very important to me that as someone whose story is often told by others for whom that is not their story, I do not want to tell a story that's not mine. And so I often want to just make that very clear. And for my work to be aid, not to be the story. And so my hope is that through this work, people find organizations to support, people learn more about the need to fight for justice for trans people in our communities, and that we connect more folks to this fight.
That's really beautiful, Sam. And I also will tell you, I've already learned so much from you through this process, because I have to admit that I don't think I understood the realities on the ground and the nuance of what it means to be, you know, a trans person generally, but specifically, as you were talking about, a BIPOC teen trans person who's dealing with a lot of different identities all at the same time, many of which are not accepted. Tell us a little bit more about what you understand as the experience there that we're really trying to educate about.
Yeah, I think, again, not to tell a story that is not mine, but as an educator in arts high school, many of my students are trans people of color, young people, as a fashion designer, collaborators, and fellow artists and designers. And personally, in my family, right? I am witness to the lives, the joy, the struggle of trans people to live the life that they want to live, not only out in the world, but at home. And so to me, being witness to that is a call to join and fight for the justice and for the rights of our family.
Okay, so before we move on, I just know that the name It's Giving is very powerful and important to you. So would you describe to us what it means and where it comes from?
I was very taken by the name Be the Change, right? This play on the word, and I thought it was very funny and clever. I was thinking about, again, sort of appropriative images, but also language, right? So It's Giving is just a phrase used in the trans and gay community. It's a primarily comes from Black, gay, and trans community, and it's been appropriated by the entire community in many ways. It's just a casual phrase folks use, and now it's something that beyond the LGBTQ community. And so it's out there, and my use of it is sort of trying to say, okay, here's this like casual phrase that everyone's using, and where does it come from, first of all, but also it's directly tzedakah, right? So this piece is about like, take a picture of it, but then you're donating. That's what you're doing through the QR code directly to funds. And so it's also literally giving. The piece is about giving. And so it's like, to me, using language that I want to highlight, but also being very direct and sort of a play on words. Thank you, Sam.
Okay, so now that we have a sense of these two pieces, a sense of the framing of the whole project from Ruth, thank you very much. We're going to turn over to some of our experts here to sort of start to unpack some of this. So, Rabbi Claudia, we're going to start with you. And I know, in addition to being a beloved local rabbi here in Brookline, you have made really an important impact in our country and our world through your involvement in social justice work. And I love that when we started talking about this project, your first words were thinking about B'Tselem Elohim, this idea of every person is created in God's image. So can you speak to this a little bit?
Sure, it's so wonderful to be with all of you here. And B'Tselem Elohim was definitely the first thing I thought when I saw these two pieces and learned about them. B'Tselem Elohim, the concept that we, all human beings, every creation, every person was created in God's image. And looking at the story of the Genesis, looking at the wording in the Torah, it says, "Va'ivra Elohim et ha'adam betzalmo betzelem Elohim bara oto," and God created humankind in the divine image, creating it in the image of God. So the creation of God, and I want to say God perhaps being the first artist, God creates as an artist these human beings, which is us. And when God does that, God does it in God's own image. And the creation story tells us that when God did that, Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et Adam afar min ha'adama vayipach be'apav nishmat chaim. So Adonai formed human beings, blowing into the nostrils of this new creation, this new art, breath of life. And this is how human becomes a living being. And I like to imagine, use my imagination of like God, whatever, how we imagine God, kind of blowing into a little nose, instead of having a nose ring in my nose, having a little God in my nose, like blowing God's breath into me and giving me life in that way. And if we imagine and recognize that each and every human being will be created in God's image, then how we encounter other human beings is the real question. And in these two art projects that we are learning about today, one of the things we know is that there is so much violence and hatred and injustice towards trans people, BIPOC, and towards people that suffer from domestic violence, because we forget that other human beings are created in God's image. How the world would look like if we would all live with that constant awareness at all time, that the person that we are encountering, even if it's different than us, even if we think that it's lesser than us, even if we are afraid of them, whatever is our relationship, if we will be reminded, that person was created in God's image. That person carries God's presence in themselves the same way that each of us, all of us do.
Beautiful. We should all think that way. Okay, so I have another question for you. You also mentioned when we're thinking about sort of a Torah portion that really underscores this whole project. It's Parshat Shoftim, which is in the fall, and the famous line, "Justice, justice, you shall pursue." And it kind of blew my mind when you said, "Why do we say justice twice?" So tell us a little bit about this.
Sure. So the verse is tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice you shall pursue. And Sam in his art presentation used that verse to talk about his work. And one of the teachings I learned actually when I was a young child in South America was always the question, what does it mean, justice, justice? Why two words? And the answer that many of our teachers teach is justice with justice you shall pursue. Tzedek im tzedek, that the way that we pursue justice is by living with acts of justice. And I'm thinking about both of these art projects as and I love the concept of artivism, which means like we look at this art and it's not just we look and say what we think and is it beautiful and how it inspired me, but you put that QR code and right away you're doing something, you're acting. You don't just think about justice or get inspired about justice, but justice is the path to create justice and you have to be actively involved. You can't just think about it or feel it. We have to be actively involved. I grew up in South America. I grew up in Chile under the dictatorship of Pinochet, and that really is what framed my life and my rabbinate to understand that my Jewish life and my being in the world is a world to fight for justice, to not let indifference and suffering to be what is the reality of our world. It was a very scary time. I was 15 when the dictatorship ended, but I remember clearly this sense of understanding that my tradition, that Jewish tradition, was calling me, was calling us, and I learned this from my rabbis and my teachers, to act in the world differently towards justice, that we can just not let the evils of the world to rule over. And again, I think that is what justice with justice comes to tell us. We have to continuously partnering, and we can continuously practicing justice in our lives.
Thank you, Rev Claudia. That's beautiful. So to shift a little bit for a moment, Elizabeth, I want to hear your perspective here. And specifically, I'll touch on Nayana's piece first, because that's really where you're coming at this from, but I know you have a much broader perspective here. So when we first spoke about Nayana's piece, you said that you were fascinated by the fact that she's broken what is typically the isolation of domestic violence through this piece. So can you tell us a little bit about this and how this relates to your work at Journey to Safety?
Sure. And I just also want to, thank J Arts and everybody else on this panel. I'm just incredibly honored and humbled, especially by Nayana and Sam and your bravery and courage and your focus on using art as a way to lift up voices of the marginalized people that often don't have voices heard, and their stories often are not told. So I just want to, put that out there first. Thank you so much. And so domestic abuse is the kind of thing that many people don't really understand. It happens across all identities, religions, backgrounds, and it is often something that takes place in isolation in between two people. And it is, people use the term domestic violence. However, we at Journey to Safety and many other places use domestic abuse because it's more encompassing of all the different tactics that often are not related to a specific act of violence. There's violence inherent in the kind of power and control that one person is imposing on another. It's a pattern, it's over time, and the tactics are varied. It's there's almost always, we hear from survivors, emotional abuse and control, verbal, but tactics are also things that have to do with using the legal system as a proxy for control, using other kinds of tactics like that just really destroy someone's life. And so our focus, and I really love what you said, Nayana, about, and I'm going to not say the name right, Zundaa, speaks to bravery and helping someone to have a good life, because that's really our ultimate goal, is to support survivors to have a sense of well-being. And, you know, we don't judge people, we meet them, whoever comes to us where they are, try to really support them in accomplishing the goals that they set for themselves. Sometimes that might mean remaining with an abusive person, even because that's what is necessary economically or with best for the children as far as keeping a stable home. The kinds of trade-offs that survivors are forced to face when they're making all these difficult, complex decisions really are just so difficult, and especially for people of color and those who are marginalized. I'm not sure I answered your question, Laura, so feel free to circle back.
No, that's great. And I guess my other question is, I know that at Journey to Safety, the big focus, or a big focus, is very community and culturally specific. And the thing I love about Nayana's thinking about her piece is that, like she said, it comes from a very personal place, but that the idea is really to make it the universal conversation that it needs to be. So talk a little bit to us about that.
Yes, thank you for getting back to that as well. We really see ourselves as holding the issue of domestic abuse for the Jewish community in the greater Boston area. And our main goal is to communicate to the community that we are here, understand it. We reach out to clergy, we reach out to all the members of our community. And the power of the wigwam that Nayana has created, the metaphor, the vision of welcoming in community when so often survivors are in isolation, because that was part of the goal of an abusive person, was to isolate them. So this vision that you've also made it transparent, that it's welcoming. I love the hands, because it's our when we think about activism and the big picture of our work, it's to communicate that we see you, we hear you, we believe you, and we're here for you. You're not alone. And so this Zundaa is really doing that. It's communicating that message. There's of course many other messages, and as a program for the Jewish community, we also serve all who reach out to us. We are also steeped in Jewish values, and people often talk about the value of if you save one person, you've saved the world. And I just want to say that what we love about the Jewish tradition is that we can interpret that slightly differently, and that we are not saving anybody. However, we are reaching out and helping people access the resources that they want. And the value is that we've reached out, that we've connected to others.
And I just want to reiterate, I think the thing that's so important to me and to our team about this project is that these issues of injustice are so overwhelming and hard to understand and to grapple with. And I love that you just made it something as simple as, you need to engage in the conversation. You just need to understand. I mean, that's a very simple thing, but a very powerful thing.
Exactly. And I also just want to say that I actually grew up in a home of artists, and I think just appreciate so much the use of art as a vehicle to engage and galvanize.
Yes, and I have to say, you have an incredible family of artists, so you really know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, so Idit, I would love to hear from you now, because I know it was 2001 when you started building Keshet. And here we are 21 years later with some progress and frankly, a lot more challenges. And as you so poignantly said, it feels like we live in a moment where we're sort of in the opposite of this concept of B'Tselem Elohim that Rabbi Claudia spoke about so beautifully. So can you speak to this sentiment and how your work through Keshet really seeks to make a change here?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that rich question, Laura. And thank you to J-Arts for inviting me to be a part of this really wonderful and thought-provoking conversation today. So actually, I want to start with a story. a Black trans Jewish teenager who's involved in Keshet's work was in a discussion together with other BIPOC LGBTQ Jewish teens, together with an adult facilitator. And in the middle of the discussion, he said, I have to say something. And he looked at the adult facilitator and he said, you know, I'm not used, and she's a Black queer Jewish woman. And he said, you know, I'm not used to being in spaces with older people who look like me, with older people who have my identities, older people with whom I feel like I share a voice and share a perspective. And so being here with you today, and this was on Zoom, but being here with you today gives me a lot of hope, because what it does is it tells me that it's possible to survive. And she paused and she said, yes, I'm definitely here to tell you that it is possible to survive. And I also want you to know that I'm here to tell you that it's possible to thrive. And I think that is the kind of moment, that is the kind of power and potential for power that is made possible when you center voices of people who generally are not heard, who generally are marginalized. And that is why it is so powerful to be here today in conversation with these very poignant and powerful works of art, you know, which are about bringing the voices and the experiences and perspectives of those who most generally are on the sidelines, and having this conversation in a time, of course, of devastating loss of freedom and rights, in a time of unprecedented legal assaults on the LGBTQ community, most particularly and acutely on trans youth. You know, and of course, this year, like every year, devastatingly, is a year of mounting murders of trans people, most particularly of trans women of color. So all of that, as you said, Laura, is the very opposite of relating to other human beings as having the divine spark in them, as being created b'tselem Elohim. And at Keshet, we work most fundamentally to imbue Jewish communities, to make it possible for Jewish leaders to create communities of equality and belonging, to create communities where every person is treated and engaged with as if they are a part of the divine. So we do that by working internally within Jewish communities, synagogues, Jewish day schools, summer camps, JCCs, all different kinds of Jewish institutions, to support leaders in creating policies and programs and cultures where people can feel at home, people like the trans Jewish teen of color I mentioned before. We work to mobilize those same communities to fight for LGBTQ rights in the broader world. And then we work directly with queer Jewish teams, giving them the space where they can really just unselfconsciously be themselves and feel like they can bring themselves fully to their communities. And through all of that work, you know, what that does is, you know, center the experiences and the voices of those who historically, you know, have not been included, have not been let into the room, or when, you know, we have been let into the room, you know, we're invited to the table, but given kind of an uncomfortable seat at the table, as opposed to being a part of envisioning how that table should be constructed, where it should sit, what color it should be, what fabric should be on top of it, what it should look like and feel like. And so it is so powerful and so critical. And I really applaud J-Arts by inviting the creation of these works of art, which are about putting right in the center, filling the space with the voices and experiences of those whose stories so badly need to be told.
Idit, thank you for that beautiful line of thinking, and also for acknowledging this need for beauty. I mean, I remember it was maybe 10 years ago that you said something about it's not enough just to include and accept people. We need to get past that. We need to get to celebrating. And I feel so strongly that what you just said, this art, this is about celebrating. So I don't know, do you have other thoughts there?
Yeah, I love that question. And I'll say, I also, I grew up in a home with an artist. My mother's an artist. And so my earliest memories are of kind of being in art museums in Italy and Israel and New York City, and not necessarily appreciating those visits as a very young child, but later on I did. Yeah, I think, going back to Ruth's words that despair is not a strategy, I think, art and celebrating identity and finding the joy in who you are. We yesterday concluded Pride Month. And, at Keshet, we talk a lot about how, pride is about resistance, pride is about struggle. Pride is about responding to injustice and responding to brutality. And pride is about beauty. And pride is about exulting in who you are and celebrating who you are. And you need all of that in order to fuel the path forward.
Beautiful. Thank you, Idit. Okay, so now we've all had a chance to sort of put our thoughts forward, and now we're going to spend the rest of this time having a little bit of a conversation. When we first started envisioning this program, I think we had a very different baseline. And then with the overturning of Roe versus Wade just recently, it really put a new lens to this conversation. And we've sort of addressed that a little bit, but I don't think any of us were really fully prepared for the weight of what that would mean and be for each of us. So I'm curious from each of your perspectives and from where you sit, can you speak to this a little bit? Like, what does this mean for our country right now, the future of our world? What can you take away from this art that helps process this possibly a little bit?
I don't know that I can connect it immediately to this art. I will say that we know that the most marginalized in our community will suffer the most, BIPOC, Indigenous people, and also survivors of domestic abuse because of this overturn of Roe v. Wade. That another tactic of domestic abuse is wreaking havoc on one's reproductive rights. And so not having the recourse of abortion and healthcare is going to be devastating.
If I can add to that, the concept of body autonomy and being able to keep your body safe, whether that means through healthcare or something like that, is really integral to domestic violence and issues like that. Also, I see this move with removal of Roe versus Wade as the beginning, unfortunately, it seems, of several things that are now on the chopping block, including, from my own perspective, the Indigenous Child Welfare Act is now on the chopping block, which keeps Indigenous children with Indigenous families when they're adopted. So I think that this really is unfortunately creating a ripple effect. And so it's going to affect a lot of different areas that we may not even really fully comprehend at this point.
Following the thoughts of Nayana and Elizabeth, and what you quoted, Laura, from Ruth, despair is not a strategy. I think that the first reaction of that moment, that when we read the news about Roe and Wade being overturned, was a moment of despair. And how do we shift? I put this as a question, and it's not a question that it's easy to answer. How do we shift from that despair to a place of hope? And how do we not stay there? Because it is easier to despair and to just say, whatever, like, I don't have it in me anymore. And I'm sure that many of us have felt that around this and around many other things, a moment of like, this is too much, we can't do it. Projects like this one and the work that so many important organizations, including Keshet and including JF&CS and so many others, and people in our communities are doing, are a reminder that despair is not a strategy, that the strategy is hope, and it's belief, and it's the real belief that we can be the change, and that this is not a place to stay. So, I think that many of us are feeling that place of despair right now, and we need to find the places of inspiration to not stay there. And this is perhaps hopefully a way for us to find that and to shift from despair to believe and to hope and to the knowledge that we can be the change.
Well, a place where I have been finding hope, which I'm also seeing in these works of art, is that, yes, the reversal of Roe legally just set us back 50 years. But what it cannot do is set us back 50 years in terms of what people hold in their hearts and in their minds. That cannot change. There are fears, based on Justice Thomas's opinion and what others have said, that next under threat is going to be Obergefell, the ruling that legalized same-sex marriage, or the ruling that legalized legalized same-sex relationships and same-sex sex earlier, that those are going to be at risk next. And that may be, and no matter what happens, we cannot turn back the revolution that has happened in people's minds. And that is the case when it comes to reproductive access, and it's the case when it comes to LGBTQ rights. And so that's something that I hold on to. And I see, Sam and Nayana, in your works of art, the dignity of people's experience and the strength of people's experience. And it's in people's stories, and it's in the dignity and strength of who people are and what they bring to their engagements with others, that change is made possible.
When the list of things that we must contend with grows, the issues that face those who are not only marginalized, but intentionally exploited and violently oppressed fall lower down the list. And so for me in this moment, I think when given a mic through art or through programming like this, I think it's important to continue to uphold the need to secure rights to life and safety and well-being for trans people in this country. And I think in this situation, if this one piece can create any awareness, can be in service of justice in any way, I think it's worthy. And it is difficult at this time to think of one thing to fight for, to put your attention towards one thing. And what I've admired about this project and working with so many different artists who are so passionate about the change they want to see, and working and hearing the voices of so many people who work so passionately in their work to seek change in their communities. I think if we all hold on to that thing, to that one thing that we're doing, if we all hold on to the one rope that we're pulling, we can start to dismantle a lot of these systems that are continuing to oppress us.
Sam, I'm curious, when people ask you, as I assume they do, and especially if it's going to be outdoors or visual on a screen, like, well, what is this all about? Or what does this work mean? What do you say?
The work is about looking at something beautiful and then realizing that actually there's something behind that that you can look at a beautiful image and you can engage with a beautiful image and a beautiful form, and that form is not there solely as for your own entertainment and for your own gaze, but also for you to actively support its life and well-being. And so in this case, for the trans lives. And so my hope is that through weaving opportunities for you to directly give to mutual aid funds and to organizations who fight for rights for trans people, particularly trans people of color, that I push people beyond just beauty and just their gaze.
Great, thank you.
I was just going to speak about, and thank you, Sam, because I think it is so important to speak about what's happening as oppression and not just to marginalize people, because people are intentionally being oppressed, and this is so endemic. And the way I find hope is by connecting to the community of in my work, and so it's become my life's work and my passion, beyond just this career that started in child abuse and has evolved to really thinking about this movement that's so under acknowledged, the Black and Indigenous women that really were the beginnings of all of this work and have led the way. And you know, these oppressions have been going on for generations. And now, you know, many of us are starting to really to see this. And where were we? We were just with our eyes covered. And what gives me hope now is that we are collaborating, we're partnering, we're, you know, working on legislative changes, both in my own community, at the state level, at the national level. And that's what gives me hope, that there is still so much energy, despite the despair that we do feel in moments when we get this kind of horrific decision handed down. And then also turning to art for inspiration and hope, not only as for activism, but for relief and beauty, which I need as well personally, and I imagine most of us need.
I find it fascinating that you said relief and not just beauty, because many people in the course of these conversations about Be the Change have talked about relief. And I find it fascinating, this sense that the art in some way brings us a little bit of relief and beauty, but not towards the end of nothing, but towards the end of helping us sort of re-energize to do the work at hand. So that was a beautiful thought, Elizabeth. And I know you've all spoken to this very clearly already, but I just want to, before we close out, we're going to have a few minutes for reflection for everybody. And I want to hear from each of you, sort of your elevator pitch of, if you were walking away from these pieces, what is the one thing you want us to take away or to do? What is the one thing where we've been talking about artivism, we're talking about the intersection of using the art to inspire activism. What is the one thing you want people to walk away thinking, doing, changing?
I want people to walk away with the idea that beauty is not just there for their entertainment, and art is not there just for our gaze and our to witness, but can also be used in service for justice. And that through engaging with art, and through engaging, in my case, with my piece, through something beautiful, you can pick up you can start to create small change that means a lot to many people.
And just to build on that, that was beautiful, Sam. It's like seeing the way things are, or seeing a rendition of the dimensions of the problem or the dimensions of the perspective of another person. You need to ask yourself, why are things the way they are and what can I do about it? And then you need to be the change.
I think that what I can imagine is what I would say to walk away from after seeing these art pieces and joining us in this conversation is the recognition that each of us have agency. There is the world that is, and then there's the world that can be. And we should not linger in the world that is. Sometimes we have to accept that things are what they are and recognize that we cannot change them things. But most of the time, and especially when injustice and we witness oppression, that we have the agency to change the world that is to the world that can be. And hopefully these conversations and this art remind us that there is a world that can be, and that we can get there, that redemption is at hand, that it is possible.
I feel like that's a good transition for me. I hope that when people come to my work and all of the pieces, that they come away with an inspiration to create their own change, reflect back on their own lives, the experiences that they've had, that their family members and their loved ones have had, think about their own communities and the things that matter to them and how they can move forward to create their own change, whether it's through art or whatever means that they're able to. And also to have a sense of not being alone, so that marginalized people who approach these pieces and see themselves reflected back in them can know that they're not alone and feel inspired to keep going and to be resilient and to work toward their own change.
What I'm thinking about, hoping that people walk away from these works of art with, is wherever people are, that they think to themselves, what can I do to, what new step can I take beyond where I've been in my learning, in my activism, kind of wherever I am, kind of wherever people are, not to be complacent and self-satisfied and self-congratulatory with where they are, but to respond in a meaningful way. So whatever people know about the lives of Native American women who have experienced violence, about the lives of BIPOC trans people, that this becomes an invitation and an agitation to learn more and to act more.
And I would add that a simple 2-word or 3 words, be in community. I think that this art is inviting all of us to be in community, in conversation. And with that comes the activism.
Elizabeth, I think those were perfect closing words in this section, because for us at J Arts, the whole point is to use art to bring people together, to celebrate the diversity of the Jewish experience, how that connects to the global experience. So yeah, this is a pretty inspiring conversation. Thank you all so much. Before we close out, I want, with all of these beautiful thoughts in mind and action steps, not just to think about, but to do, we are going to spend the next few minutes listening to a song by Rabbi Menachem Creditor. He wrote a song that is sort of the social justice anthem of the Jewish community called Olam Chesed Yebaneh, a just world we will build. And so as we listen, we're going to take a few minutes to write some reflections coming out of this conversation. One of our key partners on this project is called Tzedek Box, led by Rabbi Andrew Mandel out of New York. And the idea of Tzedek Box is that it's a new ritual supporting Jews and their allies in the ancient pursuit of a more just society. And when we connected, we realized we had shared this beautiful vision of thinking alternatively about how we make a more just world. And as Andrew says, we talk a lot about injustice and these issues, but we don't often make enough time to reflect. So right now, we're going to listen to Menachem Creditor's piece, Olam Chesed Yebaneh. We're going to spend a few minutes reflecting. You can write, you can download the Tzedek Box app, and you can put these into your box. And once a year, you can open your Tzedek Box and sort of have an accounting of what you've done in the year. So I hope that this helps all of us do something right now to take action, to say, this is what I took away from this conversation, and this is what I'm going to do. So we'll spend the next few minutes reflecting, and then we will, before we close out, have a blessing offering by Rav Claudia to give us the hope and encouragement that we need to move forward in this work.
Eloi Kol Habriot, God of all creatures, creator of all beings. As we recognize the fragility of humanity and of your creation, we turn to you. We know that you hear the voices of those who call to you in truth and walk in the ways of justice, in the ways that you desire. We ask you, God, to bless all of us with compassion, love, and strength as we walk through these uncertain times together, committed to each other. Bless those who are working tirelessly with love and dedication. Bless those who are speaking up and sharing their truth. Bless those who are afraid. Please, God, bless us all. Today, especially, we pray that you bless those in our communities who suffer and who encounter daily injustices in our country and in our world. Transgender people, especially Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and women who suffer from domestic violence. Help us be inspired by the beautiful creation of artists to be the change that is so needed in our world. There's so much uncertainty during these times, but there's one thing which we are certain. All human beings were created in the image of the divine, and we are bound in love. God, full of compassion, bless us with compassion towards one another to bring blessing, light, equity, and beauty to this broken world. Amen.
Amen. I just want to say thank you again to all of you for being a part of this really moving conversation. And you all referenced this idea of needing more hope. You all give me hope that we can do better together. And I feel so lucky to sort of be able to just facilitate this conversation through the art, because some of you may know Yossi Sargent. He's a great advocate of the arts, who is sort of the reason that the Obama poster that became the famous Hope poster became a thing. It was because of Yossi Sargent. And what he once said to me is, there's never been a movement that started without an artist at the tip of the spear. And Ruth is the first to say we need to start a movement. You've all referenced this. So I just want to say, I know it sounds big and overwhelming to think about a movement, but you're all there. I hope we're all inspired being part of this conversation. Thank you all so much. I hope we will all get out and see the Be the Change art and be able to celebrate together and think about how we can do this work all together, because it is about community, as Elizabeth so beautifully said. So thank you all. Thank you for being a part of this, and we'll see you soon.